Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything. Oh, I didn't finish talking about the summer after my senior year. Roadshow. They went through two directors. Two directors had quit, so I volunteered to be the director. I'd never directed anything in my life. It was like getting on that horse. It was arrogant of me to even try. Plus, I was playing, it was this stupid roadshow about a mission to Mars. And your uncle, Doug, was playing this astronaut. And playing an astronaut whose name was Roger. So it was always like, there was a big joke about Roger Houston. Anyway. And they meet this Martian colony. And I played a mime. There was a mime in it. And I dressed and... I didn't grow up in Mormonism, so I didn't know Mormons were weird about certain things like leotards. So I dressed in a leotard and tights. I didn't realize that was kind of forbidden in the Mormon church. And my hair in pigtails.
That's the first I've ever heard of that myself. So that must be a Utah thing, I think, because I've never ever heard of that.
Well, this wasn't in Utah. This was in Falls Church, Virginia, which is where I joined the church. And the character of the church in Falls Church, Virginia was very different than the rest of the country. Let me tell you, it was a very different environment.
From a lot of the things you said, I really kind of get the impression, especially maybe because of Ezra Taft Benson, that it became dominant later. So that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think at the time I joined the church, I joined in an area where they were much more warm and welcoming and open-minded.
Well, that also makes sense, too. The Washington, there seems to be a whole story about the Washington Temple and the Washington Church at the time. So, yeah, I'm curious about how all that went down.
Yeah, so this was 1970. So, and it was also, the church itself was very different everywhere because it was sort of a renaissance. Where it was very open and welcoming, and they made a big deal out of the glory of God as intelligence, which really appealed to me a lot, and everything about it appealed to me. I just should never have joined the Mormon church. I should never have been a Mormon because I didn't realize what an anomaly all of this was until much later. But anyway, so I go out on stage in a leotard and tights, and the audience started whistling and catcalling and woo, and like I had gone out naked.
Wow, that's amazing for Mormons to do that.
It was a huge audience too, and I was just really, I stopped dead in my tracks. Again, and it just kind of hobbled me for the rest of the road show, but we got through it. And at the time, I started dating your Uncle Doug. I had gone to, I think I mentioned that Uncle Don was the first Rickses I had gone out with. And we went to, I think it was his senior prom together. Was it, no, it wasn't. We went to some big dance together. It wasn't prom, it was some other big dance. But that was the only time we went out together. And your dad was really surprised when he found out. He said that they were really surprised when Donald had become class president. He was president of his class. He may have been president of the school. I don't remember. This may have been after I graduated. I don't remember.
Well, he's very charismatic and erudite when he chooses to not be...
Sure, but I didn't realize how weird he was. But he became, I think he became student body president. So this must have been after I graduated that we went to something together. And your father said that when he was at Falls Church High School, which had been, some 5, 6, 7 years earlier, that only the popular kids became like student body president and stuff. But we had like a 2 or 3 year period. I think I told you last time that we were weird because we were all very politically interested in politics and very civic minded and all of this stuff. And then I guess after your Uncle Donald, it went back to being the thing where the popular kids become everything, including student body president.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
But I hadn't realized that they all thought Donald was weird, and he had always been weird. And he showed me pictures of him as a kid where he's standing there looking like, with those big eyes, looking strange. So I hadn't realized that Donald had all these problems that he had. But and then I started hearing about them after Richard and I were married. But anyway, I dated your Uncle Doug first, and then your Uncle Doug, after we would go out on a date, every time we'd go out on a date, we'd come back to the Rick's home and play games. And it was great. I loved it, but your father would sit there and flirt with me the whole time, and apparently Doug wasn't noticing, and I was so stupid and naive, it didn't occur to me how unethical everything that was going on because I was socially inept. I didn't know anything about dating or anything else. I just kind of would go out with a guy and do whatever whatever. And so we'd play games and have a great time. I didn't realize there was this thing going on behind the scenes where Fosha was saying she didn't like me because I was a convert. And she didn't really regard converts as full Mormons. I heard about an incident where there was a convert family. Your grandfather Artel was a little more tolerant. I got this warped view of both of them before I went to Israel with the two of them. Then I got the full view of who they both were and what a pain in the ass Artel was. But I couldn't understand, we'd have these, I think I told you we'd have these family reunions, and the boys would all sit around and talk about how much they hated Artel. They couldn't stand him. And they'd talk about what an asshole he was and tell stories. And so I was like thinking, I don't get this. He seems like such a nice guy, and he's always been really nice to me. Fosha, on the other hand, barely tolerated my existence. Anyway, there was this thing going on when I was dating Doug. Oh, what happened was I broke up with Doug. I didn't realize what a cliche it was, but I told him, I said, I really like you as a friend, but I really will never like you as a love interest. And the next day, your dad asked me out. And I went out with him. It didn't occur to me that the next day. And it did not occur to me how inappropriate that was. And that's really on your father, because I was naive. I didn't know that was inappropriate. And for him to do that to his own brother,
Well, that explains a lot about family politics that I saw in the reunion. Because I didn't even realize that there might have been awkwardness between Uncle Doug and you, or Uncle Doug and...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Doug... And we were still working on this stupid road show, mind you. So we're carpooling to this road show with your dad driving. He had a red convertible then. And he was driving, and I would be in the middle in the front seat, and Doug would be on the right. And Doug would sit there like death and doom. You could just feel the rage pouring off of him. Uncle Doug would be sitting there with the rage pouring off of him, and we'd just sit there awkwardly in the car driving to the, church or to, the rehearsal performances, whatever, for roadshow. And apparently behind the scenes every night, Fosha was going around saying, Jody is not appropriate for Richard, because Richard was her favorite. She had a favorite, and it was your dad. And she's appropriate for Doug, but not for Richard. And it's like, when I found that out, it was kind of like, what a thing to say in front of your children. you know. Make it clear that Richard is your favorite and he deserves better than the convert. Um,
Well, it just goes to show how better some people handle that kind of thing. And I'm not mentioning names, but yes, that,
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
so your dad and I continued to date. He talked me into going out to BYU. I wasn't going to do it, but I really didn't want to go back to Lynchburg because it was a mess. And I'd been through enough emotional abuse from the head of the department. There were things I loved about Lynchburg. At Christmas time, they had a carillon in the church there. And they would play Christmas carols on the carillon. And I just loved that, because there was snow everywhere. And, and I didn't tell you how I met Jim Shand. I think it was my freshman year. And there was an impromptu snowball fight out on the quad. And this is a stupid thing to be proud of when I was a kid, but I was proud of it. I could run in boots. I had learned how to run in boots in the snow, in pretty deep snow too.
There's nothing stupid about that, although I can do the same thing, but I think it's not as fair because I'm gigantor and you're normal, so.
But anyway, I was able to dodge a lot of the snowballs because I could run so fast in the snow. And this one guy kept trying to hit me with a snowball, and he couldn't. He finally ran after me and tackled me. And that was Jim Shand. And then the next day, he saw me in the cafeteria, and I don't know if he had somebody introduce us or what, but that's how we met, was that snowball fight. Anyway, back to your dad.
That also explains a lot about him, too.
Yeah, it does. So I decided to go to BYU, and we rode out.
Do you mind if I ask? There's two questions I wanted to ask in the scope, and we are actually kind of running out of time. But before we go on to BYU, the first question I have is: I don't think you ever actually told me like the exact moment you decided to join the LDS Church.
I don't remember an exact moment. A lot of what I started investigating the church because of the stuff that was going on at the Baptist church. And I originally, yeah. But, I just gradually, they made me feel very welcome.
Right.
And when my mother, it was after I had moved out, after my father and I had that big fight and I left home. And my mother just said one day, these people have been really good to you, and I think you should go ahead and be baptized. And my friend Kathy Bowman, who was dating, what was his name?
Elder Flirt?
Something Miller. Well, no, it was a family there. Miller. I can't remember. There were like several boys, and they were all horrific flirts. And she was dating one that she eventually married. And he baptized me. I chose him to baptize me. He baptized me, and it was amazing. The place was overflowing. All these people came out. I guess I had made an impression or something. And all of these people, but the night before, the week before I got baptized, I had nightmares. I had nightmares that they were all laughing at me. We fooled you, blah, blah, blah. I had the same kind of serious misgivings about joining the church that I had about marrying your father. I had nightmares before I married your father. Again, ignoring my gut feeling about things. So, but they had been very warm and welcoming and supportive to me through a lot of stuff. So that was pretty much what sold it to me. Plus, I just loved the congregation there. I mean, just sitting in the middle of the congregation in Falls Church, and I have never been in a ward since that felt like this. felt like sitting in the middle of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I mean, the entire choir, the entire congregation would sing in beautiful 4-part harmony. They were very interested in the arts and very supportive of the arts. And, it was just a different environment, and it was just a beautiful thing. I didn't tell you that when I first started dating Doug, I had been dating another guy couple other Mormon guys at the same time, because I didn't see any reason, if I wasn't going steady with a guy, there wasn't any reason not to, But I would go to church, and the Rickses family would surround me because I was Dougie's girl. They would surround me and not let other people near me, especially guys, near me, which I found really pissed me off. It's part of why I broke up with Doug, is because I felt like, okay, this is not acceptable. I'm not your property. I mean, I had my problems. I was socially inept, but that much I was able to figure out. It's, excuse me, I'm not exclusively dating Doug.
Yeah.
I'm not Dougie's girl, and have been that she was protecting Doug and felt like, what had happened was unfair to Doug or something. I don't know, but the way she put it was horrible. So she may have had good intentions, but really bad at execution. I don't know. But she and I just never hit it off. We never hit it off. Later on, I think that one of the kids got married. It was either Raymond or Ron got married. And we went out for that wedding, and Aunt Marie and Fosha told me a lot of their experiences with the men in their lives, and I had great sympathy for both of them because, at the time your dad was much better to me than Artel and Larry were to Fosha and Marie. And then we'll go into the other stuff later, but we'll stop with before I go to BYU. We'll talk about
that
that
was actually the last thing I wanted to ask is what made you decide to go to BYU? Your dad, and we had a relationship, and I wanted to continue college, but I didn't want to go back to Lynchburg, so I decided, I applied to BYU, got in. Was Paul Shan part of the reason you didn't want to go back to Lynchburg, or was he somebody you knew more in Falls Church?
Jim Shan?
Yeah.
Jim Shan?
Well, by the time he ended up, he was the kind of guy who would spend all night playing poker before he was supposed to have an exam, and then he would complain that I failed that exam because the teacher doesn't like me. And I just wouldn't say anything. I would just sit there.
Becoming a hedge manager takes at least a little bit more discipline than that. He must have had some kind of devil's own luck, and whoever he met that that's interesting.
He had no ethics whatsoever, none, no principles at all. He was a sleaze. He makes Trump look like a choir boy. He ended up, by the time, he ended up being kicked out of school for some kind of unethical thing. He cheated on a test or something. I don't remember what he did, but my friends from Lynchburg told me, he got kicked out of school. And by the time I left, we had broken up before the end of my sophomore year, before I got mono and everything, and I was the only person left on campus who would even talk to him. He had his roommate would have nothing. Nobody liked him anymore because he was such an asshole.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was still a compassionate person, so I would talk to him, but I wouldn't go out with him anymore or anything. So at least I had learned that lesson. But so anyway. Your dad, basically your dad and I had a relationship, so I went out to BYU because I really didn't know where else to go anyway, and I didn't want to stay at home. That was out of the question, so I went out to BYU, and we drove out in your dad's convertible car, which had problems. We got one point going across the country, we got water in the gas tank or something, which caused all kinds of terrible problems. But it's one of the gas stations we stopped at, something happened. I don't know what, but that's what they were saying. There was water in the gas tank or something. We had to stop and call, somebody to help with it at one point or something. Anyway, yeah, your I think Aunt Marie and was it Uncle Doug with it? Must have been Doug with us. And your father took turns driving. I didn't drive then. But when they were up in the front seat, your father and I were sitting in the back seat making out.
With Uncle Doug right in the front seat. Good God. I had never put all that together. I mean, like I said, I've known that you dated him. I hadn't known the sheer awkwardness and just callousness of the whole complete disregard for him. Wow. I feel a lot more sympathy for Uncle Doug now.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, available in many markets, including at Amazon.com. Copyright 2018, Red Anvil Amalgamated, LLC.
To fight the forces of evil!